In this episode, we reveal a shocking family secret. A wife's hidden relationship with her brother-in-law spirals into tragedy, resulting in murder and tearing the family apart. Join us as we explore the complex mix of betrayal, passion, and violence that culminated in this tragic crime. Grace Turner, 36, was admired for her commitment to her family, her church, and the youth she mentored as a pastor in Edmond, Oklahoma. Her life was packed with Sunday school lessons, youth activities, and charity events, keeping her actively engaged in her community. Grace lived in the suburbs of Oklahoma City with her husband Eric and their 2 children. As a committed youth pastor, she not only taught biblical principles, but also supported teenagers and young adults through tough times. Grace was a respected figure in her church community, known for her grace, fashion sense, and unwavering loyalty to her family. Despite Grace's seemingly perfect life, her marriage to Eric had grown cold and strained. At 39, Eric was a missionary focused on Southeast Asia, spending 8 months each year abroad. His long absences left Grace to handle nearly everything on her own, creating a significant emotional distance between them. Over the years, the time apart strained their marriage, leaving it cold and nearly devoid of intimacy. Although Eric was respected in their faith community for his reliability, he often seemed emotionally distant, causing their bond to weaken. It became apparent that he prioritized his missionary work over their relationship, leaving Grace with a deepening sense of emptiness, particularly in their intimate life. Even when Eric was home, the connection they once shared had dimmed, leaving them in a polite but distant partnership that intensified Grace's loneliness. In that void, she became increasingly attracted to Eric's younger brother, Max Turner. Unlike Eric, Max was adventurous, charming, and had a rebellious streak that intrigued her. At 38, Max was a carpenter with a troubled past, including arrests for drug possession, which made him the black sheep of the family. However, his charisma and laid-back nature brought excitement and passion into Grace's life. Their relationship began with light conversations during family dinners and casual visits when Max helped with household projects, eventually escalating to secret encounters whenever Eric was away. Soon, Grace and Max's connection evolved into a passionate affair. In the days leading up to her death, she felt more alive than she had in years. The secrecy, the excitement of being with Max, and the break from her daily routine gave her a newfound sense of freedom. She hadn't experienced this level of excitement in years, and despite her strong Christian faith, she struggled with guilt over betraying her husband. Still, she found herself drawn back to Max, feeling rejuvenated and alive in his company. Little did she know that this relationship would ultimately lead to her tragic end. On the evening of May 26, 2011, Grace Turner's body was found in the bathroom of her church in Edmond, Oklahoma. The church, a comforting space for many local families, was quiet as the final lights were turned off. Around 8:30 p.m., Donna Chambers, the church's part-time custodian, discovered Grace in a small locked stall. Donna had come in late to finish some cleaning and was taken aback to find the bathroom lights on with the door slightly ajar, as most staff had already left for the night. As she stepped inside, she noticed Grace's feet under the stall door. A sense of unease washed over her, and when Grace didn't respond to her gentle knock, Donna called out. But there was only silence. Donna opened the stall door slowly and was met with a horrifying sight. Grace slumped over, her head against the wall, with a needle lying on the floor beside her. Later, she recounted to police that her mind raced, struggling to comprehend what she was witnessing. In shock, she stepped back from the stall, her hands trembling as she reached for her cell phone to call 911. When Donna made the call, her voice was strained and shaky, but she managed to provide the dispatcher with details about her location and what she had found. Her calm demeanor quickly faded, and she was heard softly crying as she described Grace's lifeless body in the stall. Remaining outside the bathroom, she paced and whispered prayers under her breath, desperately hoping for a miracle that she knew deep down wasn't going to happen. First responders arrived just minutes after the call, filling the church with the sounds of muffled radios and hurried footsteps. Officers and paramedics entered, and an EMT attempted CPR briefly before declaring Grace dead at the scene. The police officers at the scene quickly assessed the situation. Grace was discovered with a needle beside her, and there were no obvious signs of injury or struggle. At first, it seemed to be an accidental overdose, a shocking conclusion given her status as a respected youth pastor and active member of the church. Donna, still in disbelief, told the police that Grace had never exhibited any signs of drug use. She insisted that something felt off, stating that Grace would never engage with drugs. The officers took her concerns seriously, but the scene still pointed to a tragic accident, at least for now. The complete investigation was just starting. When the Edmond Police Department arrived on May 26, 2011, they faced a perplexing situation. Grace Turner, a youth pastor and cherished member of her church, was discovered slumped in a bathroom stall with a heroin needle still in her arm. Detective James Carver, a seasoned investigator recognized for his keen eye, was one of the first to assess the scene. Alongside his partner, Detective Sarah Maritel, he had encountered numerous overdose cases before, but this one felt different. The small, dimly lit bathroom didn't show obvious signs of foul play, yet it didn't seem to fit the profile of someone like Grace. Detective Carver interviewed Donna Chambers, the church custodian who discovered Grace's body. Donna firmly stated that Grace was the last person she would associate with drug use and urged the police to investigate further. While Donna's perspective was compelling, the presence of the needle indicated a heroin overdose, prompting some officers to speculate that Grace might have been hiding a secret addiction. As the investigation progressed, the police team found themselves divided. Detective Carver suspected foul play, believing there was more to the situation than just an overdose. In contrast, Detective Maritel considered the possibility that Grace had been concealing a drug problem from her family and church. She understood that cases like this could often surprise even those closest to the victim. Compounding the uncertainty, the police noted the peculiar arrangement of the scene. The needle appeared almost too deliberately positioned, resting beside Grace's hand in a way that seemed staged. The detectives considered several possibilities. Was the needle intended to mislead them? Could Grace have been murdered, with the killer using the needle as a prop to divert attention? Or was it possible she had died in a drug deal gone wrong, a hidden aspect of her life finally catching up with her? To gather more information, Detective Carver instructed officers to conduct a thorough sweep of the area, while Maritel began checking Grace's phone for recent messages or calls. They also reviewed security footage, hoping to identify any unfamiliar faces entering or leaving the church. Meanwhile, forensic analysts examined the needle in Grace's clothing for fingerprints or other clues that might indicate an intruder. The mixed evidence created an unsettling dilemma for the police. While there were no clear signs of a struggle, the scene did not align with Grace's reputation or lifestyle. Amidst a surge of high-profile drug-related cases in the news, the police felt immense pressure to solve this case quickly. Was Grace Turner just another tragic victim of addiction? Or had someone manipulated her faith and community role in a sinister plot? Eric Turner, Grace's husband, quickly emerged as the first person of interest in the investigation. Eric and Grace had met over 15 years earlier at a Bible college in East Texas. The two quickly connected through their shared commitment to faith and a life of service. They married soon after graduation and sought to build a life grounded in their religious values, with Eric working as a missionary in Southeast Asia while Grace served as a youth pastor and Sunday school teacher in Oklahoma. However, as the police would soon discover, their marriage was far from the ideal image it projected. Eric spoke to the police about the growing distance between him and Grace in recent years. He explained that his missionary work kept him away for 8 months each year, and when he returned, he noticed Grace seemed preoccupied and often absent from their home. According to Eric, their relationship had become increasingly cold, resembling that of roommates rather than a married couple. As Eric put it, they hadn't been intimate since 2002. When pressed further, he acknowledged that he and Grace hadn't had sex in nearly a decade. He seemed regretful, expressing a desire to have done something to restore the warmth and connection in their marriage. Detective James Carver and his partner, Detective Sarah Maritel, took note of Eric's statements. The police began to consider the possibility that his long absences and the deterioration of his relationship with Grace might have bred feelings of jealousy or resentment emotions that can sometimes lead to domestic violence. However, as they delved deeper into Eric's background, they uncovered a shocking revelation that would shift the investigation's trajectory. A routine check of Eric's online activity revealed a hidden Facebook account under a different name, which he used while abroad. The detectives found photos and posts indicating that Eric was leading a double life. While he had told friends, family, and his church that he was working as a missionary in Southeast Asia, it turned out he had spent much of his time in the Philippines, where he had a second family. Eric had a Filipina partner named Cookie Santa Cruz and 2 young children with her, a fact he had managed to keep hidden from everyone back in Oklahoma. When confronted with this information, Eric confessed to leading a double life but insisted that his secret family had no connection to Grace's death. However, detectives couldn't overlook the implications of his deceit. Eric's hidden family raised serious questions about his commitment to Grace and his character, shedding new light on the dynamics of the Turner household. The revelation of his secret life, particularly his second family, added complexity to the case. Did Grace know about Eric's affair? Could her recent distracted behavior and emotional distance have been a response to discovering his secret? Eric's web of lies introduced new possibilities, casting doubt on his credibility as a grieving husband. Detectives continued to question Eric, but he maintained a calm and composed demeanor throughout. Despite his cooperative attitude, the police couldn't overlook the possibility that his strained marriage and deception might have played a role in Grace's mysterious death. This unexpected development prompted investigators to re-evaluate the case, raising suspicions that there could be more secrets lurking within the Turner family. On May 27, 2011, as the investigation into Grace Turner's death appeared to stall, a surprising twist emerged that provided detectives with a new lead. This discovery occurred on a sunny afternoon, with temperatures in the mid-80s, a typical spring day in Edmond, Oklahoma. While reviewing Grace's digital footprint, Detective Sarah Maritel came across a series of explicit text messages between Grace and her brother-in-law, Max Turner. The messages, concealed in a separate messaging app on Grace's phone, revealed a shocking secret. Grace had been having an affair with Max. The texts painted a vivid picture of the complex relationship between Grace and her brother-in-law, highlighting the depth of their involvement. The messages dated just days before Grace's death revealed growing tension between the two. In one exchange, Grace expressed guilt and threatened to end the affair, telling Max she could no longer cope with the deception. She even suggested she might confess everything to her husband Eric. Max's replies were desperate, filled with pleas for her not to leave him and to continue their sexual relationship. Detectives were struck by the intensity of his words, indicating that Max was deeply invested and fearful of losing Grace. This revelation immediately shifted the direction of the investigation. Until this point, police had been uncertain about the exact motive behind Grace's death, with theories ranging from an accidental overdose to a robbery gone wrong. However, the revelation of the affair appeared to be a crucial piece in understanding what might have led to her murder. Detective Maritel and her partner, Detective Carver, began to zero in on Max as a prime suspect, contemplating whether Grace's intention to end their affair had driven him to take drastic action. Further analysis of the messages uncovered an additional layer of complexity. Grace's text history indicated that she had recently updated her will to name Max as a partial beneficiary. This revelation raised suspicions about whether Max's motivations extended beyond love or jealousy. Could he have been motivated by potential financial gain from Grace's death? With this new perspective, detectives felt increasingly confident that Max had a clear motive, both personal and possibly financial. Equipped with this evidence, the police brought Max back in for further questioning, intent on probing the nature of his relationship with Grace and her recent intentions to sever ties with him. The revelation of the affair, combined with Grace's updated will, cast Max's actions and intentions in a suspicious light, providing detectives with a clearer direction for their investigation. What had begun as a perplexing case with few leads was now solidifying, with the affair and will update serving as crucial clues. Max Turner, 38, also had a complicated history with the law. Known for his rugged charm and outgoing personality, Max was also marked by a rebellious streak. Over the years, he had faced several arrests for drug use and possession, earning him a reputation as the black sheep of the Turner family. Despite his troubles, Max frequently returned to his brother Eric's home, becoming a regular presence at family gatherings and often lending a hand with home projects. His troubled past added a layer of suspicion as police examined his recent involvement with Grace. During questioning, Max admitted that he and Grace had been having an affair for over a year. He explained that it had started innocently, with Grace confiding in him about her issues with Eric while they were both in her bathtub. Max claimed that Grace's marriage had grown cold and sexless, leaving her feeling neglected and lonely. He insisted that he found it impossible to refuse her advances, even describing himself as a sex addict who struggled to control his desires. He explained that their initial friendship evolved into a physical relationship as they became closer, Max detailed how their affair continued in secret, often taking advantage of Eric's frequent absences for intimacy. While Eric was away on month-long mission trips, an excuse to be with his own mistress, Max and Grace seized those opportunities to be together whenever they wanted. They took great care to ensure they wouldn't get caught, particularly by Grace's children. Max recounted that they often met at motels along Route 66 or even engaged in intimate encounters in the back of his pickup truck, selecting secluded locations to avoid being seen by anyone from their community. To keep their affair under wraps, Max and Grace communicated using disposable phones solely for their secret exchanges. They avoided public places in Edmond and agreed not to use their main phones for texting to keep their activities hidden from Eric and others. According to Max, Grace would make excuses to her children, claiming she was attending church meetings or running errands, using her role as a youth pastor as a cover for her absences. As he recounted the affair, he appeared detached and almost casual about it. Detectives noted how he portrayed himself as a man powerless against his sexual desires, while depicting Grace as the one who initiated the relationship. Despite his claims of addiction, Max's tone sounded more like someone justifying his actions than a man genuinely remorseful. His troubled past, combined with his statements about the affair, provided detectives with ample reason to consider him a prime suspect. They began to investigate his potential role in Grace's death with greater intensity. Lillian Harper, 34, had been one of Grace Turner's closest friends for over a decade. The two women met in Bible college, where they bonded over their shared commitment to church work and a similar sense of humor. Through study sessions, worship events, and long conversations about faith and life, they grew inseparable. Lillian quickly became someone Grace deeply trusted, and even after graduation, they stayed close, with Lillian serving as Grace's assistant in various church activities. Lillian supported Grace's work as a youth pastor, assisting with Sunday school programs and outreach events. During her police interview, she shared details that highlighted the complexity of their relationship. While she initially characterized their bond as strictly platonic, she hesitated when detectives pressed her for more information about their college years. She eventually admitted that she and Grace had briefly experimented with a sexual relationship during their time at Bible college, but they ultimately decided to remain friends and confidants. For years, Lillian had hoped their friendship might evolve into something more, but Grace's commitment to her family kept their bond platonic. However, Grace's affair with Max Turner had deeply impacted Lillian. Lillian explained that she was aware of the affair and had even advised Grace to consider the potential consequences if Eric were to find out. Although she had always presented herself as a supportive friend, she privately felt jealousy and hurt watching Grace turn to someone else when she had always been there for her. Detectives pressed Lillian about her knowledge of Grace's final days and her reaction to the affair. Lillian claimed she had encouraged Grace to end things with Max for the sake of her marriage and family. However, her responses were laced with bitterness, suggesting that Grace's choices had left her feeling more betrayed than she admitted. Investigators began to wonder whether these complex emotions could have driven Lillian to harm Grace, especially given her long-hidden romantic feelings. To dig deeper, detectives inquired about the night Grace died. Lillian confirmed she had been at home, but she appeared uneasy during questioning, especially when Max's name was mentioned. Although she denied any involvement in the crime, her responses raised suspicions. With a history of unrequited love and a close view of Grace's secret life, Lillian emerged as another person of interest in a case that was becoming more complicated by the day. In the early morning hours following yet another secret encounter, Max Turner's jealousy and frustration boiled over, leading to a tragic outcome. Now 38, Max had developed a desperate obsession with Grace. Their affair, once thrilling and a stark contrast to their restrained lives, had taken a darker turn in recent weeks as Grace began hinting at wanting to end things. On the night of her death, after their last meeting at her church, she told Max it was truly over, that she intended to confess everything to Eric, and that their affair had been a mistake she could no longer continue. Max felt a surge of anger and hurt at the thought of losing her and facing rejection. Realizing what he had done, Max panicked. He understood he needed to make the scene look like anything but a murder. Spotting a heroin needle among the items in his truck left over from a previous incident, he quickly devised a plan to stage the scene. Desperately, he planted the needle in her arm, aiming to stage her death as a drug overdose. He hoped that if it looked like an accidental overdose, attention would shift elsewhere, especially since no one knew about their affair. However, when police arrived, the scene didn't align with his narrative. Investigators observed that the needle was awkwardly positioned and had no fingerprints. Grace had no history of drug use, and toxicology reports later confirmed inconsistencies with a typical overdose. Max's history of drug charges and their recent arguments further fueled suspicions against him. After interviewing Lillian and Eric, detectives confronted Max directly. The interrogation started off calmly, but his story began to shift under pressure, with details becoming inconsistent. Detectives observed his nervous body language and tendency to deflect, which only intensified their suspicions. They decided to arrest him, as evidence indicated he was the last person with Grace before her death. When officers arrived to take him into custody, Max initially reacted with shock, mumbling that Grace had loved him. The reality of his actions began to sink in as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. He appeared momentarily defeated, as if grasping the depth of his crime and the betrayal he had inflicted on both Grace and his family. In March 2012, the courtroom was thick with tension as the jury returned its verdict. After months of legal battles and scrutiny of the evidence, the fate of Max Turner, 38, lay in their hands. Max was on trial for the murder of his sister-in-law, Grace Turner. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Paula McNeil, portrayed him as a man consumed by jealousy and obsession, who ultimately snapped in a fit of rage. In contrast, his defense attorney, Thomas Kent, argued that Grace's death was an accident, trying to cast doubt on the evidence indicating a premeditated act. As the judge read the verdict guilty of first-degree murder, Max's face remained expressionless, though his hands clenched tightly, betraying his inner turmoil. The sentencing, scheduled for later that month, delivered a final, crushing blow: life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was a decision that weighed heavily on him, as he grappled with the reality of his new life. Throughout the trial, Max attempted to keep his emotions in check, insisting that he had only wanted to be with Grace and never meant to hurt her. However, as he sat in court, he couldn't escape the painful truth: his actions had cost her life. The prosecution emphasized how Max had staged Grace's death to resemble a heroin overdose, exploiting her lack of any drug history to mislead the investigation. Combined with evidence of their affair and his own history with drugs, this convinced the jury that Max had acted out of a dark obsession rather than any accidental impulse. As he faced sentencing, his mind wandered back to his initial encounters with Grace and the thrill of their affair. Now, however, everything felt distant and hollow. The reality of life in prison was beginning to sink in. Following the sentencing, Max's attorney, Thomas Kent, released a statement expressing disappointment with the outcome but acknowledging the strength of the evidence against his client. "While we believe Max acted without intent to kill, we respect the jury's decision," Kent said. For Grace's family, the sentencing marked a bittersweet end to a painful chapter. Her husband, Eric, sat silently in the courtroom, grappling with the reality that his own brother had taken the life of his wife. The case had fractured the family and left lasting scars. For Max, life behind bars was the consequence of a passion that had spiraled tragically out of control. After the trial, the lives of everyone involved in the tragic story of Grace Turner changed irrevocably. Eric Turner, now marked by grief and betrayal, made a surprising decision. He packed his bags and moved to the Philippines, embarking on a new chapter with his mistress, a woman named Cookie. In June 2012, Eric and Cookie married in a simple ceremony, beginning a fresh start far from the shadows of his past. They settled in Cebu City, a picturesque area known for its stunning beaches and rich history. Eric started a small business selling handmade crafts and traditional Filipino goods to tourists. While his new life provided a fresh start, he still carried the deep pain of losing Grace. Despite this, Eric often shared photos of his new life on social media, showcasing the picturesque landscapes and happy moments with Cookie. Meanwhile, Max Turner faced life in prison for his role in Grace's death. His sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity of his actions and their consequences. In prison, Max grappled with the harsh realities of incarceration. He often reflected on how rapidly his life had unraveled, going from being a family man to a convicted murderer. Max filled his days reading and working in the prison library, finding solace in books about personal transformation. However, he remained haunted by his choices, wrestling with guilt over the affair and the murder that had altered everything. Lillian, Grace's friend from Bible college, was profoundly impacted by the events. Her long-held feelings for Grace became even more complicated in the wake of the tragedy. In the wake of Grace's death, Lillian sought therapy to help cope with her emotions. She eventually moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where she found work as a music teacher and began channeling her feelings into songwriting. Lillian often wrote songs inspired by Grace, hoping to honor her memory through her music.